Learning art on your own is difficult, and yet this is where so many of us find ourselves. Now, like this funny potato and his little spudlings that he's teaching the basics of art to, many of us started learning art in the classroom at a young age. And in fact, many of us probably started learning how to draw, how to paint from parents or grandparents when we were quite young. And yet, as we get older, that kind of education falls to the wayside. It becomes something that we don't run into nearly as much. Or perhaps you are just deciding at an older age that you would like to do it, and it feels a little bit strange, maybe a little bit embarrassing to try to figure out how to do something so unfortunately often associated with childhood as an adult. Now, on the surface, it seems like we are in the best time ever to learn how to draw or to paint on your own, how to make any kind of art. And I think that we probably are. But the wealth of information that we have on the internet is not the only thing that we need as humans when it comes to learning. There are strange things that happen when you're in a classroom, when you're learning alongside other people that simply doesn't occur when you're learning from videos on YouTube or from classes that you take on Gumroad. Granted, those are great resources, but if you can't watch anyone else work, if you can't look at the student to your right or to your left and go, oh, that's how two-point perspective works, it does make your life quite a bit more difficult. So in this sketchbook session today, I'm just going to kind of ramble and talk about why art can be so difficult to learn on our own, and then maybe just some things that we can do to work on that, because we're all there, right? I'm still learning how to draw better. You never hit a point where you're just done and you can hang up your learning hat and move on. We all have so much to learn and so much more growing that we want to do. And perhaps that's the first thing to acknowledge, is just simply the fact that this journey doesn't end. And that's part of what makes it difficult when you're on your own, is you can fall out of remembering and realizing that. Find yourself in a position where you forget that this is a long path, it's a journey, it's a very difficult thing to learn, and when you have to do it on your own, it's all the more difficult. Now, I think one of the biggest things that you run into is something I've alluded to already, which is community. When you have community, it is easier to learn anything. However, when it comes to art, I think it's all the more important. And this is because though our eyes will often tell us when something is wrong on one of our drawings or paintings, we don't always have the ability to see what is wrong. And maybe when you do see what is wrong, that hand is incorrect, you don't necessarily know how to fix it. Well, the reality is, when you see something outside of yourself, you see your friend's drawing or some other student in your class's drawing, you are often able to see things that they wouldn't. Why? First of all, because you're a different human being than they are. But secondly, you aren't emotionally attached to it. And it's really hard to totally detach yourself from the things that you're working on. We as artists have this natural ability that is really good in some circumstances to attach ourselves to the things we make. Sometimes it's because they are actually emotionally linked to us. You're drawing a character from a book, from a story, that may be something that you created, maybe something that you love. Maybe you're drawing something like I am right here, where I don't have any emotional attachment to this potato teacher, but I do have an emotional attachment to doing my art well, to making a drawing that I'm happy to show off, that I run to my wife and go, look at this thing that I made, isn't it cute? I have an emotional attachment to that. And as artists, we always seem to have at least one of those two. Either we're attached to the thing we're making, or we're attached to the making itself. And so, whilst I don't often have that first, I do frequently have that second component. And that makes it difficult sometimes for me to look at a drawing and go, this is the thing that's not working. I can usually tell that something's not working, but I often need other people to help me see what specifically needs to be fixed to make it better. So that's a huge part of why learning how to make art on your own is so difficult. Now, before I move on, I'd like to mention that we have a Discord server attached to this channel specifically to help with that, to give you an opportunity to work alongside other artists, to have them take a look at your work, and in turn, because it's all fair, right? You have the ability to take a look at other people's work and give them either encouraging feedback, which is what a lot of us need, or constructive criticism. Now, we've got everything broken into categories on the server so that you don't find yourself posting work that you just want people to see and appreciate and they end up critiquing it. But all that to say, we have a little bit of a resource there if that's something that would be beneficial to you. So why else is it so difficult? Well, one of the wonderful things about having a teacher, even if they are a potato, is that your teacher will often have a better understanding than you of what you actually need to learn in order to get better. This seems really elementary, but if you think about it, you could learn everything you needed to about geometry from a geometry book. And it's probably going to be structured in a way that is built for most people, most students on average, to help them. However, a teacher and an instructor is going to be able to walk you through those things in a way that is going to be best for you. Best for the average person, perhaps, but a teacher is a human being who can analyze you and know what you might need in order to make contact with the next step that you do. This is something that I ran into a lot in my own classroom. I would try to reach about 85% of my students with whatever way it was that I taught something from the whiteboard. But inevitably, there would be 15% or so of my students who either were more advanced or who needed some additional help. That help wasn't because they were worse artists or they were dumb or something. It was often just that the methodology that I used didn't work for them. Sometimes auditory stuff didn't work as well, or the demo didn't work in the right way. So those students I would sit down with and I would help them kind of overcome those hurdles, figure out what it was that they needed. This is one of the difficulties of trying to learn art on your own. You can take art classes that have wonderful information online, but not all of them. In fact, I'd say very few of them actually have interactive portions with the professor or the teacher. Professor is the college term, but if you find a class like that where you can actually submit your work and the teacher can take a look at it and can give you feedback, then you're actually going to overcome this, and you're probably going to overcome the first component as well. And that's going to be a really wonderful, really beneficial thing for you. But it's hard, and we don't all have access to that. So one of the best things that you can do when you find yourself in this situation where you are struggling to learn art on your own is to attach to other people, to find a community of artists that are in your vicinity or online, like the Discord community that I mentioned. There's a lot of artists here on YouTube that have them. You don't have to join mine. There's no financial benefit to you joining mine or anything. It benefits me because I have you as part of the community, and hopefully the more robust that community becomes, the better it is for everyone, myself included. But there are a lot of other artists on here that have have servers of some kind that you could join. I really think it's beneficial, and I'm not sure that you can replace it with anything else. It's not the only thing that you need. Some artists really are capable of learning on their own, but this third thing is actually a really important part of why that's often difficult, and it's context. The other people that you interact with when you're in a classroom or when you're in some kind of community give you context. They show you how fast artistic progression is supposed to be, or how fast it generally is. That's probably a better way to say it. And this is really important, especially today, because when you watch me drawing this, we'll just use this as the example for a moment. When you watch me draw this, you have no idea if this is sped up or not. Right now, it's not, but when I go through the editing process, I might speed it up. Actually, no, I'm not going to speed it up. I'll leave it at my normal speed just for the sake of this discussion. But most of my sketchbook sessions I put at 200% speed. You can't always tell. Sometimes it just looks like I'm really sure of myself as I'm moving through the piece. But you don't know how fast it is. You don't know how many sketches or drawings I did prior. If you look at the beginning of this, you can tell that I have the pencil drawing on there. In this case, I think that pencil drawing took about 10 or 15 minutes to get down, and I think the whole ink piece took about 20 to 30 minutes. But you don't know that as the casual observer. You can watch my very carefully choreographed video. And you can think, goodness, I should be working faster. I should be able to accomplish this more quickly. I should be able to see things and put the shapes down on my first pass. Frankly, you don't know if I recorded 6 sessions prior to this and this happened to be the best one, or if this is the worst one or the only one I recorded. You don't know that. Now take that for a moment and think about Instagram. Think about ArtStation, all these other places where you see artists' work. You are seeing a very tiny piece of curated art from that particular artist. You lack the context of what that piece was for, how long it took, what kind of preparation there was that went into those things. And importantly, when you're learning how to make art, it's really easy to lose the context of how much time has this person put into this. A lot of artists throw out figures about how long it takes to become good at art, but it's very, very difficult because not only do you have to add up the hours of practice and the hours of not practicing where you're thinking about things and analyzing things, but you have to think about what is practiced as well. So when somebody throws out it takes 3 years or 5 years to become a good drawer, it's like, that's great, but that does nothing for us because we don't understand how many hours a day you're talking about. We don't understand what kind of practice you're talking about. I mean, I could teach a student how to draw photorealistically if they have good fine motor skills inside of about 10 to 20 hours. It's going to be using grids and it's going to be doing tiny little versions of transporting things from a reference image onto a sheet that's already perfectly gridded out, which for me is a really boring way to draw. But if the goal is just photorealism, it's not really, really difficult to do. It's just you have to use lots of extra tools to help you. So it's really difficult nowadays because we have so little context about all of the artwork that we look at. And I think that's really the crux of this whole thing. I think it makes it emotionally difficult for us. We look around, we see so many amazing things, and it's so easy just to assume this is what this artist got up and did this morning with no prep, with no first drafts, with no thumbnails. And we don't consciously think that most of the time, but that's how our unconscious mind goes about it. Our unconscious mind seems to look at the pieces that we see on Instagram or YouTube and go, wow, that's an amazing piece. And then we look at our sketchbook, our random drawings that we scrawled last night while watching Netflix with our family, and we go, my drawings are not as good as that. And therefore, I'm not as good of an artist, and my self-worth is not as high as theirs is. Even if we're only looking at it from an artistic standpoint, it's still a detrimental thing, but we don't have the context. So that's probably the crux of this, I think. As to why it's so difficult to learn how to make art nowadays by yourself, because we lack so much context. It's always been hard, but back in the day, like when I was young, learning how to make art on my own at home, I wasn't able to see 10,000 other artists' work. I was able to see the artwork in the books that I had and in the little booklets for video games, and that was pretty much all the other art that I saw. As I got older, I started to see art from my friends, but again, it was really limited, and my context was always pretty solid. Once DeviantArt came out, that was the first place that we started to see lots of sharing like this. It was a little overwhelming at first to see like, oh my goodness, this is what these people are up to. But to be honest, I was in the beginning of high school at that point in time, and mostly it was inspiring because it was the knowledge that that could be done. Now, it was still intimidating because those people were so much better than me. And really, if I go look at their work, they're still better than me. But it was really revelatory to see what could be done. And it was really, really cool to see. But I think those 3 reasons are huge aspects of why it is so difficult to learn art on your own. I think you need a community to do it well. I think that a teacher and a curriculum will often point you in the right direction. A teacher is better because they can analyze the human you and know what you need next. It's really difficult. Even if you have a beautiful curriculum laid out, it's difficult to know what you personally need to tackle next, where your strengths and weaknesses are. And then the last one is that we lack so much context looking at other people's work nowadays, and their work can be so detrimental for our psyche when we see it. So I hope that this has been a benefit to you. I hope that you've enjoyed this in some way. I would love to hear about your experience in the comments below. And if you are looking to join our Discord community, there'll be a link for that in the description below as well. Thank you to patron Who, What, Where, When for your continued support. And if you would like to support the channel, you'd like to see the scripts ahead of time, maybe you'd like to vote on what kind of things I talk about in these sketchbook sessions or the podcasts, there's a link to our Patreon down below as well. Well, have a good one, y'all. See you soon.